Good afternoon, pilot teachers, and good afternoon, students.
Good afternoon, Mr. President.
Thank you. Sit down. Okay, today we are going to continue on with our work on looking at Indonesia. We have started off by mapping the monsoon Asia region. And in our last lesson, we looked at mapping Indonesia. You were expected to name some of the main islands in Indonesia, the seas in Indonesia, as well as the straits. And that is what we have looked at on mapping Indonesia. Today, we are going to move on to looking at recognizing the climate of Indonesia. And for the climate, it should be easy. If we know the location of this particular country, we should be able to pick up straight away what type of climate that particular area experiences. For the work on climate, we are going to concentrate mainly on looking at a climograph. And the climograph will be one that is actually found in our workbook. And we are going to use the climograph in our workbook to answer the questions on climate in Indonesia. But before we do that, let us correct the activities that we were supposed to have completed for our homework. You were given the rest of the activities to do with mapping Indonesia, of which you should be able to find it on page 3 for the completion of the following. The first question that you were supposed to have completed for your homework was to mark in those 3 lines of latitude, 5 degrees north, 0 degrees, which is also the equator, and 10 degrees to the south. So on your map, you should have 3 lines of latitude. B, you were also asked to shade in all of those areas from your map which are part of the country Indonesia. And finally, C, there were a couple of places that we did not put down on the map in our last lesson. And those areas included showing where Sabah, Sarawak, Brunei, and Singapore are on our maps. For the work on Papua New Guinea, indicating where Papua New Guinea is, the Philippines and Australia, plus Malaysia, that is already shown on our map, so there is really no need for us to redo those activities. Only those countries or those areas that are not on our maps, that is what we were supposed to have completed for our homework. So we will start now with the correction of those 3 important lines of latitude. That is 5 degrees north, equator, and 10 degrees to the south. Okay, you double check and please make your corrections on your map work. We start off with 5 degrees to the north. We start off, with the equator. Okay, for the line showing the equator, it is important that you should have some point of reference so that you can identify where that line actually runs. Just at the tip of the province Irian Jaya, you have the 0 line going across. It passes through the bottom part of the island, Halmahera, and then it passes through the northern section of Sulawesi, the island of Borneo, and the island of Sumatra in the middle. So we double check and see if you can identify some of the points that particular line passes through, so it makes it easier for you to be able to locate or to plot. Okay, so that's for the equator done. You double check, we make our corrections. The second one is the 5 degrees north line. Okay, above the equator, you should be able to work up the tip of the island Philippines, where the 5 degrees north should actually run. It also runs through the top of the country Brunei or Brunei Darussalam, and it passes through Malaysia and the tip of the island Sumatra. Okay, that's for 5 degrees to the north. You make your corrections. And the last line that you were also supposed to indicate is the one which is 10 degrees to the south. I hope nobody has put down 5 degrees to the south. It's supposed to be 10 according to our instructions. And if you look at the island Timor, just at the tip or the bottom part of the island Timor, that's where the line should actually run through. So the island Timor should serve as a point of reference to indicate that particular line 10 degrees to the south. Okay, do your corrections and then we'll move on. The second activity would like you to shade in the areas which are Indonesia. And if you look at your maps, you should be able to shade in. For the island of Borneo, there is also Malaysia, the country Malaysia there. So I hope you have not shaded in that whole island. It's supposed to be a portion or section of it, and a smaller proportion of it belongs to the country Malaysia. The eastern part of it should be marked by the province Irian, the southern part of it with Timor and Java, and the most northern part of it will be the tip of the island Sumatra. You have broken lines on your map, and those broken lines on your map, they are supposed to show political boundaries, and the political boundaries should be able to help you identify which areas are not to be shaded. Okay, and that is activity 2. You can check on our map there, the brown color areas are supposed to be the areas that you should have shaded on your map work. Okay, finally, the last one is to indicate the following. Can you check your map work? Malaysia, is it given already? Yes, so there is really no need for us to indicate again Malaysia. The Philippines, it is already given, the country Philippines, so there is really no need for us to indicate that. Papua New Guinea, we can see that it's already given, no need for us to indicate. And Australia. So according to our maps, those 4 areas have been already included. It's only the others that we now need to correct and to include. Okay, we'll start off with Sabah. Okay, Sabah is on the island Borneo, and it is the northern tip of the island where the area Sabah is located. So you can write that in, use an arrow to accurately plot in that particular place. Okay, the next one is Sarawak, again on the island of Borneo. This section here. Note that Sabah and Sarawak are also provinces in Malaysia, not Indonesia, because the political boundary is here, and any area above the political boundary then are part of the country Malaysia. So Sabah and Sarawak are 2 provinces in Malaysia. Okay, double check and make your correction. The next area is supposed to be the country Brunei, and Brunei Darussalam is a country here, located also on the island of Borneo. You can see a boundary drawn, a small boundary on your map. And I'd like you to ensure also you indicate that accurately or correctly. Okay, and finally, Singapore. The country Singapore, located here. It's at the most southern tip of the Malaysian peninsula. Okay, it's a small island here. At the southern tip of the country Malaysia is Singapore. And also indicate that accurately. Okay, we double check and make your corrections. Anyone with any queries or questions with regard to the map work? Okay, good. Now we have a complete map of Indonesia, and the completed map of Indonesia should show us some of the main islands in the country, the seas, also the straits, and also the surrounding areas, especially where the country shares a common boundary, whether it be the sea boundary or a land boundary. And if there are no other questions, then with the map work, we are going to move on now to looking at the information on climate of Indonesia. If you can check on your booklet, you would have noted now we have completed up to page 3 on our case study, and we are now ready to move on to page 4 of our booklet to look at the work on climate. So let's make reference to page 4 of our booklet, as the Climatograph that is given on page 4 will be the graph that we are going to use for answering questions on the climate of Indonesia. Okay, having drawn in those important lines of latitude, 0 degrees, which is the equator, 5 degrees to the north, and also 10 degrees to the south, it gives us an idea in terms of latitude, how far Indonesia actually extends to the north and to the south. Having a fair idea on the location of Indonesia, we should be able to identify what type of climate that particular area should be experiencing. Okay, from what we have covered or learned already, what type of climate do you think Indonesia experiences? It is found, according to what we have done, about 5 degrees north to about 10 degrees to the south of the equator. So if a country that sits along that particular latitude, what type of climate do you think they would experience? Christopher, thank you. What type of climate?
Equatorial.
Definitely equatorial. And equatorial is correct also. If we find out a little bit more about this particular country and its climate, we will note that it has an equatorial type climate. What are some of the characteristics in terms of rainfall and temperatures of an equatorial type climate? Renagi, what do you think? What would be some of the characteristics of an equatorial type climate? Okay, make reference mainly to rainfall and temperatures.
It experiences wet and dry seasons.
Wet and dry? Wet and dry? Papua New Guinea, we experience wet and dry season? No, we don't. The wet is correct, but not dry. Hot is the correct answer that we should have for the equatorial type countries. Like Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, it is hot and wet, not dry. Okay, so make that correction. Definitely it's hot and wet. Describe the rainfall. How can we describe rainfall in terms of its amount? Kiran.
Very heavy.
Okay, very heavy, good, and also very high rainfall, right? Throughout the year. How about temperatures? How can we describe the temperatures generally of those equatorial type climate? We said heavy rainfall right throughout the year. How about temperatures? Moderate temperatures? No, I don't think so. Kathy, what do you think?
In summer, the temperatures are hot, and in winter, the temperatures are also hot.
Okay, good. It is hot in summer. It is also hot in winter. When we look at the temperatures generally of that type of climate, temperatures are high and constant, right, throughout the year with very little variation. And the very little variation, we'll see that that particular region or those type of countries which experiences the equatorial type climate do not have a big or a large temperature range. That is the difference between the highest and the lowest temperature is very small. So equatorial type climate, we said for Indonesia, we're looking at high rainfall right throughout the year. Temperatures are high right throughout the year, as well as the temperature range is very small. Do you think Indonesia would experience the monsoon season? We say it is an equatorial climate, but do you think this particular country, Indonesia, will or could experience the monsoon seasons also? Yes, it will, because it sits in the area of the Southeast Asian region whereby the monsoon does affect it. So if we look at the Climatograph now of Indonesia presented in our booklet there on page 4, We are looking at the climograph for just one place, and that place is Jakarta. What do you know about Jakarta, the place Jakarta? In Indonesia. What do we know about this particular place? Susan?
Jakarta is the capital of Indonesia.
Okay, very good. It is the capital city of Indonesia. And on which island does Jakarta or is Jakarta located? On which island? We've already done mapping Indonesia. We should have now a fair idea on the main islands in Indonesia. Jakarta is, as mentioned by Susan, is the capital city of Indonesia, and that's correct. And on which island is it located? Frank.
It is located on the island of Java.
Okay, good. It is located on the island of Java, and that is the island also of our case study. Okay, now let's look at the climograph for Jakarta, which is given on page 4, and we are going to do some work on that particular climograph. There are 3 questions that you will find on your booklet on page 4. I have added the 4th one so that it has to do also with the natural vegetation. I'd like you to make note of those questions quickly, and then we are going to look at the climograph, and from that climograph we are going to answer those 4 questions. The questions are: number 1, study the climograph given and then see if you can work out the annual temperature range. Every one of you should know how to do the calculations. Number 2, what is the annual total rainfall? Number 3, you are now required to write in a sentence giving a brief description of the climate of Jakarta. We have briefly gone through it, but I'd like you now to put it in writing. And number 4, or D, describe the natural vegetation of an area that contains or that has the type of climograph as shown on page 4. Okay, make note of those 4 questions and then use your climographs to answer those 4 questions. Okay, we need to look at the answers to those 4 questions. Catherine, what is the annual temperature range according to our information on the climograph?
The annual temperature range is 1 degree Celsius.
Okay, good. That's the correct answer. Temperature range is 1 degree Celsius. There's some of you who are writing 26, 27, etc. How do you calculate temperature range? No? Shelley, can you explain? How do we calculate temperature range?
You get the highest temperature for the year, and you subtract the lowest temperature. You subtract the lowest temperature by the highest.
Okay. Her explanation, you find the highest temperature, you find the lowest temperature. That is definitely correct. Then you subtract the lowest temperature from the highest temperature. So if you check your line graph right across, what would be the highest temperature reading? It is 26 degrees Celsius, and the lowest temperature is 25 degrees Celsius. The difference then is the temperature range, and that is 1 degree Celsius. Okay, that's all. A lot of us are maybe not getting this correct. That's why also in our test, you're expected to calculate temperature range. All you had to do was find the highest, the lowest temperatures or temperature readings, and then subtract the lowest from the highest. Okay, so that's question number 1 done for that particular climograph. Question 2. Gideon, what is your answer for question 2, which reads, what is the annual total rainfall?
$1,973 millimeters.
1,973. Okay. Millimeters of rain. Anyone with a different answer? Francis, the mic is at the back.
1,855 millimeters.
1,855 millimeters. Any other alternatives? Okay. From the back, Renagi.
Nine 9,968 millimeters. 1,968 meters.
1,968 millimeters of rain. We'll have the last one.
We've got, I got 1,865 millimeters.
If we did measure accurately right across from there, our answer would be 1,865 or 1,866 millimeters. So this would be the closest answer. So therefore, we will stick with that as our answer for that particular question on the annual total rainfall. Is there a need for you to divide by 12? No, you're not asked to find the average. So there is really no need for you to divide by 12. Some students actually found the answer and then divided by 12. You are asked for the annual total, and annual means yearly. Another word we use to describing annual is also yearly. So the question may also read, what is the yearly total rainfall? But instead of using the word yearly, we've used annual there, which is the same thing on what we mean when we talk about the yearly rainfall. Okay, so question number 2, we gave a couple of answers, but we will stick with 1,865 millimeters because that is close to the measurements taken from the Climatograph on page 4. Finally, question number 3. Describe the climate of Jakarta. We have already discussed this in class together. You're supposed to now put it in writing. Anita, what have you got written down? Can you read the description of the climate for Jakarta or of Jakarta?
There are hot conditions in all seasons. There is summer and winter, and it has very heavy rainfall and is very humid and wet all year round. There is little or no temperature range.
Okay, double check if you have the following in your description or in your sentence, then you should definitely be on the right track. In your description, you must state that the climate is hot and wet generally, high rainfall right throughout, especially if we're looking at an equatorial type climate. Humidity, or it is humid, which is also correct. There is little temperature range, which is also correct. We also note that we need to describe the temperatures a little bit more. We're talking about wet, high rainfall. If we're talking about hot, temperatures are also high and constant right throughout the year. Therefore, very little temperature range. Note, if you look very carefully at the Climatograph of Jakarta, here we're looking at high rainfall, hot and wet right throughout the year. The line graph definitely is according to what we have mentioned, hot and high temperatures right throughout. But look at the rainfall. Why do you think rainfall is not high right throughout the year? Gideon.
Because of the monsoon winds.
Okay, very good. Here we're looking at the impact or the effect of the monsoon season also. So here is a modified equatorial type climate, whereby instead of having high rainfall right throughout the year, we have in the beginning and the end months, there is a lot of rainfall for this particular area, Jakarta. And in the middle months, the rainfall is not as high as in the beginning and the end. This is the time when the monsoon winds bring a lot of rain to that part of the country, and this is the time when the monsoon winds are usually dry, coming off the continents, therefore not a lot of rain coming to that part of the world or that particular area. And our description should be able to describe according to what we can see from the Climatograph. Okay, finally, we mentioned that this particular type of climate is an equatorial type. So what type of what type of vegetation do you think would be the main vegetation or dominant vegetation of that area? The dominant vegetation, Dorothy, for the last question.
Tropical rainforest.
Okay, definitely tropical rainforest because equatorial. So therefore, the dominant vegetation type should be tropical rainforest. We will look at the other areas in Indonesia in our case study, and then perhaps we will look at the other vegetation types that are also found beside the tropical rainforest. But tropical rainforest is the dominant plant or vegetation of that particular region. Okay, with that information, that will also conclude our work on mapping Indonesia and climate of Indonesia. In our next lesson, we are going to move on now to looking at land use, especially on the island of Java, which is the one that we are working on for our case study. Okay, class, if you could stand up now, please. To the pilot teachers, our keyword for lesson 141 is Borneo. Good afternoon and thank you, students.